Presentation. Come and grab your seats, please. Thank you. While we're getting organised.
Good evening, everyone. Okay, now is a good time to quieten down. It's good to see so many people here. Heidi, you've had lovely enthusiasm tonight. Brought a lot of new ideas for these people. Great, thank you. So we're about to start our 8 o'clock session. I'm Jo Curtis, I'm a member of the club, and I'd just like to say thank you for all coming tonight. Such a mild evening, isn't it? And you know, it's the 25th of June, which means Christmas is 6 months away. How about that? Shopping, yes. Well, have you taken as many photos as you thought you would for half the year? It's amazing, isn't it, how time flies? Anyway, welcome everyone. Have we got any guests here this evening? Yes? Excellent. Well, thank you. Thank you for coming along. You're most welcome. And we've got people at home. Is this our camera up here? Right. Hello, all of you guys watching from home. So tonight's program is great. We've got several things on the list, and you've already had a great time with Heidi at 7. We've got MDC coming up first, and then we've got a special speaker who we'll introduce shortly. Thank you, John, for being here. So can I ask the MDC to roll? Can I?
So what I'm saying, I need to apologise. I'm not quite sure how this has happened. I have been out of home for 3 weeks without my computer, but when I put it on, it seemed to be in order, and it seemed to be the right file on the right disk, but obviously it's not. So we'll have it next week. And there were 19 entries, and it was a nice field to see. But for on the 30th of June, the current MDC only has 7 entries. What about me is the topic, which is maybe a difficult topic, but put your thinking caps on and get it in by the midnight on the 30th of June. And we'll see you next week with this one. Thank you very much, and apologies.
Thank you, John. Things happen, don't they? Oops. As with technology, I was on my Lightroom this morning and the whole thing seized up on me, so it was Control-Alt-Delete and then stop the taskbar and went to no, I don't. Thank you, John. And so then I started up again and away I went, and then it seized up on me again, and in the finish I threw my hands in the air and said to Pete, I've broken it. So at the moment my Lightroom's broken. It's just because I don't know what to do with it, that's all. It can be fixed. Things can be fixed. So here we are already. Now, who's introducing John? I am. Great. Okay. Well, it's a privilege. Thank you. So John is a member of our club, and he has spoken before with us. Have any of you seen or heard him before with his presentations? Yes, and we've all come back for more because you're so inspiring. Thank you. And let me see, what did I actually put here? That, yes, you're very creative and sometimes graphic with your work, sometimes unconventional too with his ways. And he goes beyond the traditional perceptions of the medium of photography. So for those who haven't seen him, you're in for a treat tonight. And those of us who have, great reminders on what we can do when we do notice things. So John, it's all yours. Are you all wired up?
I'm wired up.
Oh,
yep. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Joe. I've been a member of CPS nearly 20 years, and this is the most nervous I've been in presenting anything, because I want to take a different slant on photography, which some of you might see as being a bit wacky, but I'm hoping others will see it as an opportunity to be more creative. So let me get organised here. Is it going to work? Not sure why. This is what I always worry about, is technology. And me using it, I mean. No, that's not going to work. So, okay. So some people are just lookers, some photographers, I mean, just lookers. They take snaps and have a record of what's in front of them. So it's in effect documenting the scene. It's a sort of a record shot. But others, the ones that most of us are jealous of, are the ones that notice interesting and different things in the scene and photograph them. So the difference in the skill of noticing, the first ones don't notice as much as they should. The second ones are very competent at doing it. Is that they are more skilled at learning to notice, both being aware of the need to notice and two, aware of the sort of things they should notice. So as photographers, it's not what you look at that matters, it's what you notice. And what I argue tonight is that what you notice is, and getting better at noticing, is a secret to better photographs. And that is what I wanted you to take away tonight. If anyone asks you later on, so what did John talk about? I hope you'll be able to say that he talked about how important noticing was and how to get better at doing that. So what is noticing? I've set up a bit of a table here, and you see the quote at the top that I just noted just a few minutes ago. It's not what you look at that matters, it is what you notice. And so we're going to go down talking about it. So the big difference between just looking and noticing is that noticing is an active, positive thing that you're doing. And of course, when you notice, you're becoming aware of a particular thing rather than just everything that's in front of you. And also when you notice, you engage as you get a little bit deeper down with something. And it's an interaction, not just an observation, but you're beginning to interact with what you've seen. Because remember, if you've noticed something, it's caught your attention. And then if we have time, we tend to go a little bit deeper and connect with the something that you've seen, that you've noticed. And in your imagination, I believe there's a dialogue that goes on. We're not conscious of it, but there's a toing and froing of being aware of what you've noticed and what's that saying back to you. But underlying all of the mindset for noticing is to be fully present, totally aware of the present moment and what is in front of you. And you need to have a mind wide open. Now, of course, I don't mean wide open for anything, like in the middle of looking at trying to make a photograph, you think, what am I going to have for dinner tonight? I mean wide open in the context of looking for a photograph. So the most important thing, I believe, is that you have an attitude of receiving rather than feeling that you are imposing yourself on the environment. You let the moment be what it is rather than trying to change it. And you allow space for the photo to exist. It's a kind of listening to what's going on. Okay. So the other thing is that sounds as if it's a very formal process of noticing, but in fact, it's very natural, and it's useful to be aware of how you're going about your noticing in order to improve. But sometimes that noticing happens in a flash. Other times it takes a lot longer. So, for example, this one here, I was coming out of the library, the new library, had my camera with me because I've been doing some shots around town, and I was about to cross the road, Colombo Street, and as I stepped over the curb, directly below me was a grate with a little stone, a round stone sitting in it, and sitting beautifully on the third. So that was just a flash, just none of all that business of starting to connect and so on. I actually connected in a flash. And this one, some of you have seen before, and if I have time later, I'll talk about how I got round to getting that image. But I was in Venice for a week and was determined to have 2 photos that would be that I'd put on the wall, print and put on the wall at home, and remind me of being there without any comparison with what most people take when they go to Venice. So just to go back through that, noticing is active as against just looking is passive. Then you become aware of something, whereas just looking, you could be looking at 1,000 different things but see nothing. And that's what it was like when I first came to CPS. I would go out on shooting weekends and so on, predominantly landscape, and have very little success because I wasn't attuned to noticing something. But what was interesting is that after about a year, one of the photo shoots was actually outside the art gallery at twilight. And the idea was for us members of the club to learn how to deal with twilight photography. And I was in my element there and managed to get a shot that, in fact, I got honours for later on. So I'm going to come back to this point time and time again of noticing is you have a greater chance of noticing a worthwhile photograph if it's an area that you're very familiar with, a genre that you're very familiar with, which in my case was design. So another way of looking at the difference between looking and noticing is that looking is scanning. We need to scan. When we drive a car, we're scanning, but not looking at anything in particular, or shouldn't be, unless it's something that's dangerous. Whereas noticing, as I'm arguing here, is a case of receiving. So our looking, when we scan, is dispassionately scanning what is in front of us. Noticing is receiving and actively engaging with something in our environment. So let's look more closely at this idea of noticing. Henry Cartier-Bresson had this way of thinking about it. A photograph is neither taken nor seized by force. It offers itself up. It is the photo that takes you. This is something that you wouldn't normally think about and expect to be said about making photographs. So I'm going to go through it in a little bit of detail, sentence by sentence. So the first sentence, a photograph is neither taken nor seized by force. So his argument there is that photography isn't about aggressively capturing a moment or forcing a scene into an image. It isn't about domination or control. So then he says it offers itself up. So it presents itself to the photographer, and there needs to be a sense of openness and receptiveness to that. You can see why I was nervous, can't you? It's not exactly what I normally talk about. So then he says it is the photo that takes you. So he's flipping the idea of the photographer being the active agent taking a photograph, and turns it around and says that the image actually grabs the photographer, pulling them into the image, into its orbit, the photograph's orbit. So you don't grab a photo, it grabs you if you're engaged. Okay. So in summary, according to Henry, photography is less about control and more about being deeply present so that you're allowing yourself to be moved by what unfolds in front of you. Another famous photographer expressed it this way. See the subject first. Do not try to force it to be a picture of this, that, or the other thing. Stand apart from it. Then something will happen. The subject will reveal itself. This all sounds airy-fairy, but I'll keep on this theme and see if I can convince you. So here what he's in effect saying, you have to be a patient observer as a photographer. The world is full of moments or scenes waiting to be seen. So when you're open and attentive, the moment reveals itself. It's almost as if it has a life of its own. So that really sums it up. So the role, if you have this receiver type role that you're taking as a photographer, the question is whether you can find those things that are revealing themselves to you. So let's review what I've said so far, because it's probably not what you expected me to say. Noticing is the secret to better photos. Noticing is active. We become aware, we engage, we connect, we're fully present, mind wide open. A photo will reveal itself or offer itself up. It's ready for us to notice and to receive it. We don't grab the photo, it's more a case of it grabbing us. So, is there any questions? Have I explained myself broadly speaking here, and we'll dive deeper later? Am I getting the idea across that to try, instead of feeling you're creating and making images, that you are receiving them? And I'm going to talk a bit more about that in a minute. But have I expressed it sufficiently well that whether you agree with me or not, do you understand what I'm saying? Anyone not? Because they're the ones that help me get better. Okay, too shy. Okay, so broadly speaking, there are two approaches to photography and how we educate ourselves in photography: making or receiving. So let's just look at this a little bit. So making, I start here with this fact that Ansel Adams and many others said we don't take photos, we make them. And I understand what they mean. It means that we don't just take a snap, but we manage to create it. Broadly speaking, the idea is to take the elements of design, such as light and shape, texture, and all those sorts of things, and construct an image using those things. And I've talked about that in many other talks that I've given here. The flow tends to be from the parts to the whole. So we're talking about things like shapes and light, colour, and so on. And we, in the way we're learning, we tend to be thinking you put those together to get the final image. Part of the problem with that is that the sum of all those things is greater than the parts. And we don't look at things, I'll come to that, I'm getting ahead of myself here. So we're going from parts to whole. This idea of making aligns itself with the idea of the photographer as an active creator. So let's look at the receiving thing that I've been talking about up till now. What Cartier-Bresson and Brent are suggesting is that the world offers images to us as photographers, and our role is to receive them. The act of photography then becomes a kind of discovery rather than a construction. What I like about this is that when it works, it is more exciting than thinking you're making and creating, because you get to a point where you say, well, there it is. Not always enough times, but yeah, it happens. So this means that we see the whole image first and then look at the parts. The flow is from the whole picture that we're seeing and receiving down, and we can then give attention, once we've noticed it, to the parts, to the detail, to the shapes, the colour, and etc. And I like this concept because it is close to how perception works in the moments of intuition or recognition. We don't start with details when we're looking at an image and assemble meaning all in one go. We sense the whole and only afterwards unpack the parts. So we're looking when we're out in an environment, we're looking for the whole and then dig down into the parts. And of course, that process parallels the process that people go through who look at your own work or any other people's work. You are stopped by the something about the photo, and then you can look at the parts. But no one, when they're looking at the photo in an instant, do a quick analysis on how the lines have been used, what the shapes, how they fit in, what kind of light it is, and so on. We can do that as an analysis, but it's not what strikes us and causes us to pause and look at something rather than just move on. So the making approach is about imposing form. The receiving approach is about recognizing form that is already there. So by form, I mean the shape of a photograph, of how it looks within the frame. And so we adjust to, when we see a photograph, we see that in one go, and then can look down at more detail. So obviously, if noticing is so important, then the better we get at noticing, the better our photography will be. So if you want to make better photos, you must get better at noticing. And again, this came through to me very much as I reflect back on what I've done in photography. And when you start, you're not particularly familiar with that form that you're looking for. That's what, with experience, you build your intuition to be more diverse and encompassing more things. So here's just some ways, there's heaps of ways, but some ways to improve noticing. And I'm going to go through these sequentially, talking about each of them. So the first one is priming, which is the best way to improve noticing, and is you can mould it, plan it so that it can achieve whatever outcome you want. The simplest way of describing what priming is to take an example of when you're thinking about buying a car. Normally, before you're thinking about buying a car, most people don't pay a lot of attention to the cars that are on the road in front of you unless you think they're going to be dangerous. So we're scanning. Coming back to that term, looking is scanning. So we're scanning but not taking particular notice, except of course if you're really keen on cars, and I know one particular person in this room is, then they will notice particular cars. But for most people, when we keep agonising over we can afford this car or what colour it should be, and so on, what happens is the next day or two you're driving along and all of a sudden there's a whole lot more of car X that you're considering to buy on the road, and all the others are less relevant and get less attention. So my argument is that, this is a priming, what you've done is primed your brain to minimise noticing things that are not important to you, but to notice things that are important. So there's a parallel, of course, with that in photography. So when we are if we're not thinking a lot about what we want to do in photography, everything looks a bit like the left-hand side. Everything's greyed out, like when I first joined CPS, and I would be looking at some scenery in the landscape, and everything was there, but I wasn't noticing anything in particular, and others that were more experienced than me would come back from that session with some fantastic photography. So the greyed out cars is a bit how if you're not attuned to something in photography. But if you are, and I have to use my example because I don't know enough about your ones, but If you are attuned, as I have been right through my life, even before I wanted to get into fine art photography, was I loved design. So I was always drawn to interesting things in design. It's interesting that a lot of people, there's some people in this club who are well known for other things, like taking portraits in Asia might be one of them, and all of you can guess who I'm talking about. Someone else that experiments with different colours and water and liquid and oil and everything else. And again, the person who introduced me has a very good reputation there. And so it goes on. There's many in the club here that are very well known particular types. Ian Walls even went through a tree period where whenever you saw a tree up in a competition, you thought, it's probably Ian's image there. So what I'm arguing is that, let's talk about priming specifically first. Priming is a psychological technique where you expose yourself to certain stimuli that prepare your brain to notice in a particular way. So when we took the example of the new car, just simply thinking a lot about getting the new car meant that we then noticed new cars without any intention to do so. There was no intention. It's purely a subconscious exercise. So, and as I mentioned earlier, the good thing about priming is not only does it draw your attention to something that you care and think about a lot, it tends to diminish your attention and interest in other things at the time that you've done the priming, or following the priming. So, as I say, in the new car example, thinking a lot about a new car primed our brain to largely filter out noticing cars in general in order to free our mind to see the new car. So this is a very, very powerful thing. And as I said earlier, it seems like magic because we've simply programmed our brain to notice it subconsciously. So using the new car effect or priming. I use the new car effect because it's much easier to visualize than using the word priming, which is a technical term. So what I'm arguing is what you feed your brain influences what you notice. What you feed your brain influences what you notice. And as I've said in my case, because I'm passionate about design, I'm much more likely to notice and have an image present itself to me, reveal itself to me, that has strong design elements, and a whole lot of other images that get presented to me in the real world just pass me by largely. So this is the image that I talked about when I was in front of the art gallery. And this was the first time in the club since I joined the club. It was roughly a year, I think, about after I joined, that I felt that I was in my element. And the particular photo, normally I don't explain what this is, but for the purposes of tonight of noticing, I noticed that the sculpture that move around, I assume they still do after the earthquake, do they? Yeah. That at a certain angle, it got quite close to the aluminium edging to the windows. So those curves there are the edge, and it was black glass in between, or dark at night. So the sculpture started to move close to the windows, and so I waited until another cycle came around, and at the right angle got closer to it, and so I had an aha moment when that came together. And my argument is that, first of all, what you feed your brain influences what you notice, as I've said. The more you feed one thing, the new car priming effect will be stronger and you'll notice more photos. Conversely, feed a wider range of things and the priming effect gets spread thinly over more things and therefore less photos are noticed. So what I'm arguing here about is whether you specialise or whether you generalise. The structure of CPS is such that you can learn to do almost anything. There'll be workshops, talks, and everything else, and trips that on landscaping or whatever it might be. So we'll call these different genres. My argument is that, my idea is for the club is that you try when you're learning and in the earlier stages of developing your photography, you try lots of different things, and that's what CPS is very well geared towards. But I'm arguing here that once you've tried different things, try and narrow down to one or two genres and then go deeper. So I'm arguing for narrow and deep rather than wide and shallow. And I believe that what happens with famous photographers is that they start doing that as well. I'm just going to show you a few photographers who are so well known for the sort of thing that I'm showing that they became famous because they did it so well and so extensively. So of course Ansel Adams has to be the first, and he was just so passionate about grand American landscapes. He was a very capable photographer and did other work, but what he's famous for is this sort of work. So I'm not saying he wasn't capable of doing anything else, but by heavily concentrating on this sort of work, he became, and doing it, incredibly well, he became famous. And of course, Henri Cartier-Bresson loved this sort of active imaging. I don't know if portrait photographers here, do you know Gregory Heisler? He's got an incredible book that's where he's got 50 portraits in there. But, I mean, look at that. It's so expressive. And if I have time later talking about photos, I'll explain how he came, how that was revealed to him, shall we say. And I've used this before, Elliot Urwitz's photographs of dogs. He does a lot of dogs. He does other work as well, but he does so many of dogs that he's famous for it. And this one, I don't know, Pete Turner. Does anyone know his work? Ian does. So Pete is just over the top enthusiastic about colour, and all of the images that you ever see online are bright, bright colour. He probably photographs other stuff as well, but that's what's made him famous. So what I'm saying is try and, as you get more experience, try and narrow down the genre, the subject matter or whatever that you're interested in, and you, through priming, because you think a lot about that, you will get better and better at priming for it. So that's just really summarising what I've just said. That issue of specialising or being a generalist has a lot of pros and cons with it. I'm presenting what I think you should consider. I'm not telling you to do it, but I'm very happy on some other occasion to have a discussion about some of these other things. So priming was the first thing on that list. So now I've got some others that are not as big a topic as priming, but are all things that you can do. So the most important thing is attitude. And the first part of what I've been talking about is having an attitude of receiving. And attitude or intention, you can use those interchangeably. So cultivate receptive noticing. Let things reveal themselves without searching. So looking, just repeating, looking is scanning, noticing is receiving. Another one is slow down. Rushing dulls perception. And lots of people advise us when you're at a particularly outdoor scene or something like that, where timing isn't critical. Pause before you get your camera out, before you start looking through the lens and so on. Slow looking. Has anyone come across slow looking? No, okay. Quite a long time ago, a good few years ago, a lecturer in design and art and design in the States, just got fed up with her students casually glancing at photographs, thinking, I'm familiar with that, and then moving on. And so what she did was took them into an art gallery, sat them down in front of a particular painting and said, no phones, and you're going to look at this for 30 minutes. So I'm going to do that next week at 7 o'clock. The only thing I'll change is it won't be 30 minutes, because you'd probably all walk out on me. But in that case, they were paying money to get a degree, so they buckled down reluctantly. And of course, what happened is they looked at the painting and had an immediate impression of what they noticed first thing, and then looked around and thought, what am I going to do with the other 29 minutes? And then got bored, of course, and frustrated and angry, and then decided, well, I better at least start and try looking a bit more. And so they started drilling down at of the painting to get a better feel for what's there, what the artist was probably doing, and more importantly, how they were reacting to that. So we're going to do a variation of slow looking next week. And if you could bring pen and paper, not that you have to share anything you note with me or the rest of people here, but it's just that it sticks more if you do that. And what I'll do is start with a very short thing and give a bit of guidance, and then we'll move into some that go a few minutes and see what you might learn. Study other photographers. You all do it naturally now with the internet. Before the internet, not as many people used to do it. So what I suggest is you scan the portfolios of particular photographers, pick some favourites, personal favourites, not necessarily their favourites, and study those in detail, each of those. And ask yourself things like, what feeling has this evoked? What did the photographer notice? How did the photographer frame it? What would you have missed, etc.? Use the camera as a tool for noticing. Excuse me a minute. This is something I pinched from Ian Walls. I may not have expressed exactly how you do it, Ian, but the idea is to casually, without striving for perfection, take lots of photos of a subject or theme and see what happens. And it doesn't matter what happens. I mean, it may be good, it may be bad, or whatever. This one involves a little bit more explanation. Practice descriptive observation. So an exercise will be to look at something and describe it without naming it. For example, round, glossy, reflects a small patch of light is how you could describe a cup. So the idea of not naming the subject matter breaks down automatic labelling and deepens sensory noticing. In other words, you begin to realise why that thing is significant, not what it's called, but what it's doing in the photograph. Paul Valery summed this up very well. Seeing is forgetting the name of the thing one sees. Another technique to improve your noticing is to change focus intentionally. So you can zoom in on small things, or you can step back and notice the whole composition and various other angles that you can take. Keep returning to a scene. Some of you here, I'm sure, put up your hand if you've got great photographs going back to a scene that you've been at before. I'm sure there's lots, yeah. But we sometimes forget because conditions can change. You can go at different times of the day and different times of the year for that matter. And of course, the more you experience a scene, the more intimately you will experience it. Right, this one, I'm just having a bit of fun here with this one. But using stationary time when you're still and you can't do things that you want to do, or you're waiting for something to happen, is one of the best times to practice noticing. So, in case you can't read it from the back, waiting at traffic lights. So an exercise on shape would be to notice the shape of the brake lights on the back of the car in front. And it's interesting, since I wrote this, I've been more diligent at doing it, and I'm becoming quite an expert on what the latest fashion is in the shape of brake lights. And this is crossing over into noticing other shapes when I'm driving along or whatever. Waiting in a queue, exercise on shape. What is the toe shape of each person's shoes? Now, some of you will know I used to have a shoe shop before the earthquake and might think that I've mentioned shoes because I'm biased towards shoes. But I was thinking if I mentioned other things that, the colour of someone's eyes, it might end up either a great romance or having a fight because someone thinks you're encroaching on their space. So, and then the same thing, you could look at the colour of a person's shoes. So by looking at colour, also with the brake lights, for colour, you can look at the red of the Perspex brake lights and how that compares with the body colour of a car. So you're then educating yourself on how red goes with other colours and doesn't go so well with other colours. And it's just presented for you at no cost, and you're not losing any time because you have to wait while you're at traffic lights. And then I mentioned about queues, and then waiting for an appointment. So again, you could think to yourself, have a little checklist in your mind. What shapes are there in the furniture in this reception area? Or what's the predominant colour in this reception area? And what are the other colours? And in terms of exercise and feeling, does the space have a friendly or austere feeling? Because I'm going to be talking a minute about feeling. That's the next topic. But you react differently to the mood of a place, and we react differently to the mood of an environment that we're photographing. So let's move into that now. So just think up, try those and see how it works, but those are totally off the top of my head. Try and think up other things that you can do in those sorts of situations where you have to be stationary without having to think about anything too much. Okay, feeling. As you know, when we watched some a video on judging a while ago, they kept talking about the story. I want to suggest that the story is always, practically always, our feeling about this image that's offering itself up to us. And this is what Don McCullen said about it. Photography for me is not looking, it's feeling. If you can't feel what you're looking at, then you're never going to get others to feel anything when they look at your pictures. By feeling, I don't mean a very careful analysis, psychological or whatever, of what feelings you've had, but just acknowledging that something in a flash, when you've looked at this scene that you're going to photograph or someone else's photo, just try and acknowledge that there is a feeling and generally what it's about. And I try and have just one or two, a very short phrase, one word or a few words, but not a full explanation. And I also try not to use the names of things, the subjects that are in the photograph. So I was at the point that I wrote this, I went through some notes that I had and picked out feelings in pages of notes that I had. And this list is not a comprehensive list, but was just what happened to be when I read through stuff that I'd written. So these, if you can find a word that describes how initially you felt about the scene or the photograph, if you're looking at another photograph. And some of these words explain a lot in terms of how you've reacted to it, and I'll come back to some of that in a minute. Examples of that in a minute. So I like this phrase, photography is emotion made visible. One of the things that I personally struggle a little bit with the idea of the photograph has to have a story, is that you think there has to be a narrative. And there may be a narrative, but it may be simply a reaction of this is soft, or this is majestic, or it's dark, or it's bright, and so on. So I think to have this concept of photography is emotion made visible is a good challenge to us. So that's just a reminder, that phrase, photography is emotion made visible. It's not simply about capturing what something looks like, it's about revealing what it feels like. So we need to be in touch with what our reaction is when we saw this scene that we want to photograph. So making an emotion visible is the main thing in a photo, is my argument. In the same way that judges say that the story is the main thing and everything has to coalesce around that. My argument is that you need to identify the feeling that you have when you're looking at the scene and then craft the image so that that is the main thing. I'll pause. Can you read that at the back? So I hope I've made the case that I can say only make photos that evoke a feeling, and obviously avoid photographing the obvious, the mundane, because it doesn't evoke a feeling. So the man who said, I see no reason for recording the obvious, photographed mundane objects such as peppers, shells and cabbages. And some of you know who I'm about to talk about. But he turned these ordinary mundane objects into essential abstract forms. He wanted to move beyond mere representation, recording the obvious, and instead capture cheaper, often overlooked aspects of his subjects. His name was Edward Weston, and his photo, Pepper number 30, 1930, is one of the most iconic still life images ever. And all of you will know it, I'm sure. So I can explain the feeling of that in one word, sensual. And I don't have to add any others, although other things in the image complement that and give it more depth. The other thing I like about that is that quote is from Gregory Heisler, who does the photograph of the faces, which we're coming to next. But I just love that quote of his, the picture should stop you, not the subject. So it's just coming back again to it's not the subject, it's what the picture is displaying. So here's one of Gregory's images. And look at the emotion and feeling in that. It's just incredible. There is a backstory to that, but I'm trying to cover too much tonight to do that. So here's a mundane image of mine when I was in Italy. And the feeling that I've got, the one word I've got for that is quirky. Because what got my attention was that reflection, particularly down in the foreground. And I actually darkened the gondola down the far end because that didn't contribute to the main thing. It was, the main thing was that. Now I know that most people will pick that as Venice, but the main thing was that band of light. This is an image, is it Ship's Cove up in Marlborough? And not being strong on landscape, I looked around and there was this carved pole that looked absolutely fantastic. And so here, graceful is the word that I use, the feeling for this. That beautiful curve, it's just stunning, I think, where it's skinny at the left, gets fat at the very top, and then tapers off beautifully coming down. So, and you can see from my tone when I talk about that how much more interested I am in design than some other things. So I've been talking up till now about receiving images that are out in the real world, being in touch, fully present with your environment, and you will then start to see things that other people miss, other photographers miss. But having seen that, you have to then convert that to a photograph. And so what I suggest, so what we're moving from is a mode of receiving to a mode of crafting. So crafting comes back to, you remember when I talked about the two approaches to photography, one being receiving, the other being making. So the craft, we're now moving into the making mode. And I don't know, I know a few of you have seen the John Cleese video that was made decades ago on creativity. Has anyone seen it? A few, very few. So what he talked about was, he was talking about creativity in the context of what they did when the group of them, when they were producing their various comedy shows. And the first part of the work they did was what they called open mode. And open mode was where anything could be suggested. And then they narrowed that down at the end to one, a bit like us narrowing down a whole lot of photographs of the same subject and choosing one as being better. And then they switched to closed mode. And he argues that very, very few comedic people have that discipline of staying in open mode, and then when they leave that, being in making mode, or what he called closed mode. So I think that understanding this dimension here is what can contribute to being more creative. So I've created a process for creating the image where, obviously, as you will have guessed, with my talking about feeling being critical in every photograph, identify the feeling evoked by the image. Then treat this as the main thing. Then arrange the four edges to make the main thing the main thing. I'm going to give examples of this in a minute. Check that anything detracting from the main thing is eliminated or minimized, and then look for ways to highlight the main thing. I've got a printout of this that I'll hand out afterwards, because I think if you agree with me, it's worthwhile having in your camera bag to remind you of the process. So let's move. I've already talked about feelings being evoked by the image. You've heard me before talking about the main thing. JK, when he was talking to me a few weeks ago, and said, "What are you going to talk about, John?" He said, "It's not making the main thing the main thing." And I said, "Well, it will be a little bit about that." Anyway, number 3, arrange the 4 edges to make the main thing the main thing. Now, I talk about the 4 edges because to talk about cropping is too easy. So let's just look at what Winnegard talks about. 4 edges change everything. When you put 4 edges around some facts, you change those facts. So photography is not about the thing photographed. It is about how that thing looks photographed. It's something else. So, So if we take that statement, photography is not about the thing photographed. It's about how that thing looks photographed. The reason for that is that the difference between a scene in the real world is to do with the difference between a scene in the real world and that scene photographed. The scene in the real world is boundless. When we look out, it's just within a big round circle of our vision that we have. Depending on what it is, of course. If it's something smaller, that's a wee bit different. The scene in a photograph is constrained. It is forced to relate to a square or rectangle. So there is, in every photograph, unless you decide to do a circular photograph, there is always this scene-rectangle relationship. And that is where composition comes in a lot. So, as I say there, therefore, the fundamental task of a photographer is to arrange the scene-rectangle relationship in such a way that is pleasing and gets the desired attention. So let's have an example. So imagine you're looking over the bay full of boulders down in Meraki. When I put 4 edges around a part of the bay, I get very different photos. The point is that they are more than 4 different angles of the same subject. They each evoke a different feeling from the same subject. So I'm coming back to that theme in photography. Don't get seduced by the name of, or the actual subject so much as what feeling gets evoked from it. So let's take those 4 photos and I'll tell you the feeling that I had with them. So this one, the feeling, the number one thing was, for me, was beauty. So I selected what I thought was the most beautiful boulder group that were well grouped together. And then I put the 4 edges around it, making sure there was nothing else that would detract. And in fact, making sure that the hill in the background didn't intrude too much. And so then to enhance it, I used a long exposure, as you can see, because that made it feel softer rather than rugged. It also meant that the main texture was on the actual boulders rather than in the sea. Nothing wrong at all of capturing images with the sea coming over the boulders. There's some brilliant work done on that. And the other thing is that I enhanced what I felt was the beauty of it by having slightly pastel colours to it, so it made it more gentle against the harder stones. So if you ever are down there, you will never find that image because I flipped it. Looking, you know how we all look left to right in the images? So when it was the way that it was down south, you looked at the boulders first, and it was no good putting clear space on the right because it just didn't feed in properly. So if I'm not putting it in landscape competition, then I don't care if I flip it or not. Okay, this one I've called rough with smooth. And so I've used the 4 edges to capture a denser group of boulders with just a few rough bits. And by cropping the distance, the sky and the distance down, it put more emphasis on the rough ones at the bottom and the front there. And again, I've used a long exposure to highlight the shape of the boulders. So this one is steel-like. And it was a dull day, dull and boring, where you normally call that sort of thing. But of course, doing black and white, that's the big thing for people who haven't tried much black and white. If you're somewhere that's quite interesting, but it's a bit dull and boring, black and white can work very well. But although it was a bit dull and boring, there was enough side light later in the day coming in to hit the surface of that boulder. And so it was capturing the steely aspect of it. And normally, that, as you all know, images here tend to be lighter than on a calibrated screen. So, you know, that's a mile away from the other two that I've talked about, and yet it's the same boulders. And then this one I call juxtaposition of large and small. And what happened here is I was noticing as I walked towards this that the light was skimming low, fairly low, and was producing a stunning colour in that boulder. And then as I got closer, I saw the line there with little lines to the side and thought, I'm going to move in and concentrate on that. As I said about learning to notice, move in closer or get further back. As I got right close to it, was about to compose the image, I saw that tiny pebble. And so I focused in, brought the 4 edges in an appropriate way, that the balance between the pebble and the boulder. I didn't want the boulder totally dominating, although of course it's huge compared with the pebble. To try and get a good ratio there so that the main thing still became the main thing, the little peg there, or the contrast of the two. And of course there's no distraction because there's no other boulders showing. In my earlier days here, I would have probably photographed that with other stuff there as well, and the main thing wouldn't show up as the main thing. The only significant thing I did to it was increase the contrast down the front so that that little pebble showed. This is a landscape here, and I was driving down towards Queenstown where my daughter used to live, and the feeling I've called for this, the reaction I had that stopped me was light in the dark. So I arranged the 4 edges to take away excess sky and excess foreground, increase the contrast so you didn't see any detail in the foreground, and it brought up the white bits. It's interesting, you know, quite often years ago, but not so much now, people took out, and Photoshop enables you to do it, took out the line of the telephone or power line, whatever it is there. But I found that links up nicely all the way across the image. So you have the light over on the left, in the middle. There's a little bit of cloud behind that telegraph pole, and then the moon up there and the cloud taking your eye back over to the left. So that's the end of what I had to say. I have got some photos that I could show you on another file, but you're probably tiring. Well, I suggest that I need to just get that up, and I'll go through. I won't labour it at all, but I suggest everyone stands up and walks, turns around 10 times or whatever you do to... Yep. The light switch? Yep. Hold you up too long, so shall we get going again? Okay. So, oh yeah. So that we find ourselves in different situations when we're looking for photographs. And so I've just got a few here that I'll go through very quickly that I describe as walk-bys. So just when you're walking along, if you have your camera with you, that they can crop up. So the first one, I used to live on Richmond Hill and would walk up the hill through the farm up towards the Summit Road. And one day I decided fences are the thing that I'm going to photograph. And of course I didn't photograph an ordinary straight fence in a green paddock. So this one I called Damaged is the emotion that I have to it. And as you can see, the subtlety of the post leaning, but the dip in the wire is not actually matched up with that, and that mismatch gets your attention. This is another one that's just I've called Bent, and I don't want to spend, I don't want to hold you up too long, so I'll just move quickly through. This one, in terms of how photographs can come about, I was in London and was really disappointed in photographs I'd taken of the Tower Bridge, sitting down, sulking a little bit, and saw the light getting really low and people walking past. And I thought, there has to be a photograph there. Took several, and this one is the one that stuck. So that comes back to that patience, being patient, observing and waiting for something to happen. Of course, we often wait and it doesn't happen, but this is just an abstract, a graffiti type thing. or cleaning a paintbrush probably. Getting the character of reinforcing. That was just after a bit after the earthquake, and I was walking along and saw a job that had been held up. Again, noticing. It's just getting attuned to seeing these things when you're walking along. And just seeing how the glass acts like a mirror. This one was all the angles, the rectangles, diagonals and everything else. So sometimes you have to, this is what I talk about crafting. That was the image I took. But the image that I crafted was that. So I was chairman of Restart, and so I was in the red zone a lot while we were getting the Restart containers all built and established. And so what happened is for a long time, no one was getting in and putting new posters up, you know, how they do. So I saw that they were weathering, and I did a series of photographs. You can see here that the little round circles is, I've forgotten, when you print posters, it's made up a composite, isn't it, of dots. And so I got a macro and was, I don't know, this far away or something. Then totally different, but still the frayed paper, which reminded me of a bit of an influence from Japan. So others I've got just through driving by. I don't mean taking it as I move. Some people are very good at that, not me. So that was in Skye, and the whole feeling I had there is vastness. All of you have been to Skye, and someone, was it John, said that you're going shortly over there. The thing that impressed me the most with Skye is how vast the place is. This was just going a bit before you get to Birdling's Flat, and I saw that with telephoto lens. It looked dull and boring in colour, so that's a using infrared program. Again, this was walking through Rotorua and just saw the contrast of those stakes compared with the background. That's me playing around with the effect of, you know, down south where you see the mountains and that image that I had of the snow. And that one is with snow, and I've made it incredibly light to try and just pick out and grained it a lot to pick out all the verticals through there. So I just pulled up on the side of the road, took it. This is one between Geraldine and Fairley, and played around with it to make it look a bit different. This is in LA. I think I've got, yeah. So that's the photo. I was trying to get good photos of the building, Disneyland concert, Disney concert building, but it was the tree, nature, and then the huge structure behind it. Whoops. So that's down when I lived in Sumner, and in Sumner it looks like a big, predominant, you know, bit of land sticking out, but in fact that's quite small. And the bit on the left is shag pile. I mean, you know, what it was before, shag pile. So some that had a bit more work on it. I've already talked about that. This one here, be patient for it to offer yourself up. The kids were walking past. That water was tiny, walking backwards and forwards. And I thought, God, they're all a bit boring. And then I saw that girl in red and took 2 or 3 photos as she went backwards and forwards. That was just in near Lake Ellesmere, where I wanted to abstract. But it wasn't photographs don't always have to be super sharp. That wasn't quite as sharp as I wanted, so I gave it a effect, and some people say to me, who have bought it off me, have said, oh, it looks a bit Japanesey, like almost like a drawing. So you can cheat sometimes. So very quickly, I'll go through these because I don't want to tie you too much. In the noticing, I had a camera with a friend in the art gallery, inside the art gallery, and we gave ourselves about 20 minutes before having a coffee to walk around, and got a few quite good photographs. But this was the best, and this was looking down from above the stairwell, down when they used to have that table on a black carpet down below. There's structures there now, artworks and so on. And I saw that guy deep in thought and actually writing. Took several photos, but that one had him actually writing on that bit of paper. But it didn't come up as well as I had hoped. So I tidied it up a bit and then put it into black and white, and then again tweaked that to get it parallel with the borders. And then to give it more weight here, I added some black background at the top. And the thing I talk about noticing and how you feel about it, what I noticed first was all those tops to the chairs, and the fact that the ones here were almost even except the one on the left, not quite, and the ones up the top just aren't even at all. And then the two staggered on the left. Those are the things that I notice. You will notice other things that interest you more than those sort of things. This one I have shown before, but for those who haven't seen it, I'll go through it. In the art gallery in Australia, I used to go to Melbourne twice a year through business, and I tried so many times to photograph this. They have water running down the glass at the front of the gallery, but inside, no longer now, but probably 10, 15 years ago, they had these statues in a line going across inside the glass with the water coming down. And I tried so many times. This is repetition that I was talking about in the list of things to get better at noticing. So I tried yet again, because the light, this time, the light was better outside for it. So I kept taking photos. This just didn't work. You can see the people behind the legs there cluttered that up. You didn't get a clear line. This, too many people were detracting. And again, too much distraction. Too much again. Too much. Too much. Too much. Patience. Too much. Too much. So it finally offered itself up to me. And there it was. So it's a female sculpture facing this way, and it's a young woman walking that way with an outline of Dad behind. So I had to get, of course, eliminate, when you put the four edges, eliminate distractions. So I had to get rid of that post. And I put a sort of an antique, thank you, sepia look to it. And then flipped it, like I said, I'm quite happy. And I call that walking away. So, and I've had that printed reasonably big, and it looks quite nice. Coming back to that one, that's what I took on the day. So I took the back of it off, or just made it so dark it didn't show. So here, this is a good example of what excited me, had to be the hero, had to be the main thing. And so I just made everything else black. And by making it, some will say that's too much black going to the left, but by making it a lot of black, I think it gives more emphasis to the thing that I think is so elegant. You've seen, a lot of you have seen the roadside tree, Ian Wall's tree, this one. 10 minutes past seeing this, because I couldn't park on the side of the road, I said to my wife, this is in Scotland, it was a foggy day, said to my wife, Ian Walls would never have driven past that. And so I said, can we go back? And I found where I could pull off the road further back that I hadn't noticed it when I saw the tree. So here I am. This is just ones that offer themselves up, but not all of them are what I want. And then this one was getting much closer, so I cropped it in. So you just get a bit of a echo down the back. But there's way too much sky, it's dwarfing it, so I took that down. And then I flipped it so you read left to right rather than right to left. And that was the final image that someone in this room judged very favourably for me once. This is another example. I was in Canada, and there was a hill to the right that was shading, late in the afternoon, shading this lake. But I thought maybe I can get something with that boat because it was quite graphic. And these are images that I took. But finally, when it came up to a dock, I went back 2 or 3 hours, no, it couldn't have been that long, at least half an hour or an hour later, and got that shot, because again, the light was changing. Got that one, I thought, this is near gold, but that one's better because it has only reflections in the front. And so I tidied that up and then put it into black and white. And so, yeah, another one here, actually at the same place as that photograph, where there's, so I took this photo knowing that I had to craft it when I got home. So I increased the contrast and was quite pleased with that, but it was too busy. So I then dulled down some of those. So you saw predominantly 3 in the middle there. So this is all to do with noticing what it's like. Whoops. So the other thing is in Glasgow, there's this famous building that Hadid, the architect who's dead now, but designed, and it was the first one in England that her work had ever been made, whereas it had been made in other places. And so I knew this building, I'd seen it online. It's a transport museum, so it's good inside as well, but it was the structure that I liked. So kept trying to see things offering itself up to me, and so these are all a bit interesting, but not sufficiently interesting. And then I started to narrow it down a bit. And finally it was this image, which I then tidied up. And so the idea here for me from understanding form and structure is that it's a yin and yang. And that white bit coming down to the bottom joins the roof to the ground, or close to the ground. But those peaks take the eye back up again. And I love, detail is very important. The structure and the form of that I've just described. But the icing on the cake, or the cherry, it was that line around the edge there that she designed. So I don't photograph the whole building very often. It's nearly always a feature where I say, yeah, the architect knew exactly what they were doing there. Now, the last one, I'm very conscious of time, but having a week in Venice meant that I wanted a couple of photos that I could print and have on my wall back home that weren't replicas of all the millions of ones that are online, because I'll never do as good as those. So I wanted my idea of Venice. And so this one, I got lucky. We were coming back from a concert. This is just behind the Opera House there. And I said to Jan, we went back to the hotel, I have to get my camera, and went back. And it was a new Sony, and I didn't have a tripod that fitted it. And so I did a handheld, and it got slightly blurry, and I thought, oh, maybe I'll try new technology to sharpen it up. But then actually put a bit of grain into it and made it sort of as if it had been taken, maybe 50 years ago over there. So you had a little bit of this. For me, the feeling that I was looking for was the spirit of Venice. The other one was a challenge. And after a while, I decided that I was going to do something with the front of a gondola. I didn't want the whole gondola. That's what lots of others do, but I didn't want to. So I kept trying and 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 trying. And then there's a spot that I saw that the lighting was good and it had some corrugated iron behind it, so it didn't detract. And so I kept trying with that as well, and then finally got that image there. And so played around with it, got it to that point, although I did superimpose. You can't see the background there so much, but there is a little bit of ripple of water, and then flipped it the other way, so you read left to right. And when I wake up in the morning and see that, it takes me back. So I think I'm conscious of time, so I think I'll call it a halt there. It is very late, but if anyone has questions that are burning, then I'm very happy to answer them, and others can drift away. Sorry? Oh, yeah. Yep.
Well, there's such a lot. I don't know how even to describe what I've learnt from that, John.
So it was a lot, yeah. That was my only concern. So here I've done some notes, and would you mind, Alistair, passing them around to anyone? And I've also printed out. Yeah, absolutely. Might be more than one there, but yeah. Thanks for that.
Well, while Gordon and Alistair are passing those words of wisdom and pearls of information around, I'd like to thank you, John. This is John Suckling again. Thank you so much for coming tonight and giving us your address. And I was really interested to hear how your traditional perceptions, how I introduced you, a little different from how we sometimes work our magic with our cameras.
Yeah.
And it's in the editing and the crafting, isn't it, afterwards, that, and to me, those ones that your examples that you showed us were the most valuable.
Right.
Because I could see the photographs that you'd made and how you crafted it into a finished product that gave you the feeling you wanted. Yeah, so thank you.
It always happens, but I just wanted to try and provoke people to think a little bit.
Yes, well, I'm sure it certainly happened with me. Happened with you guys too? Yes, indeed. So, John, a small appreciation of our knowledge gaining tonight, and thank you very much. We really appreciated you being here. So just to finish the evening, thanks to our sound people over here, Dennis for opening and closing, again our speaker, and Heidi who did our first session tonight. Thanks for you guys at home being on board with us, and thanks to all of you for coming today. And Gordon on sound, thank you. Good night and drive home carefully.